What is up, guys? Matt McKeever here. Hope you're having a good Monday. And yeah, we are halfway through the month of March already, which is pretty crazy. So as always, let's kind of hang out, smoke some weed together. Hit me up with some questions in the chat if this is your first time hanging out with me on Monday night. This is pretty much what we do. I hang out. Tonight, I've got a pre-rolled joint, courtesy of Peter, the producer. He bought these as pre-rolls, so it sounds like some of them were a little too well rolled. So we'll see whether the drag on this works or not. If not, I may panic run to my bathroom and grab a bong, but we'll make the best of it either way. And yeah, actually, one thing I was going to do before I even get into anything else, and in the meantime, guys, feel free to jump in the comments, hit me up with any questions, but let's do this screen share. I've been meaning to shout out Mark here more. So if you guys aren't following along with Mark, I would really encourage you to check out Canada Poly. I've never actually really thought about how that's supposed to be said. Probably Poly, Canada Poly. But anyways, really encourage you guys to check it out. And yeah, seems like a great community, a great guy. So there's forums here, and essentially I'd encourage you to just kind of check it out. Now, a few things I'll say is, like a lot of internet forum boards, right? You get into some interesting, weird conversations. So I'm certainly not endorsing everything that I see go on in these chats. But one thing I will endorse is every video of Mark's I've watched up until this point, guys, I've considered to be really well put together. I've considered to be very insightful, and 9.9 out of 10 times I find myself in almost complete agreement with him, at least on most of the subject matters he's discussing at this point in time. So it's just fascinating as we come up on the 1-year anniversary of lockdowns, quarantine, COVID-19, and all that stuff to maybe question whether we should be going to additional news sources. And so if you guys are Canadian and you're thinking about maybe going and trying to find other Canadian influencers covering the news or politics, I'd really encourage you to check out Mark on Canada Poly. And again, he's on like Rumble and where else is he? YouTube, Twitch, all those places. So anyways, really encourage you guys to check that out. All right, let's stop the screen share. And yeah, the beard's growing in. It's interesting. It hits different phases where all of a sudden people comment on it. So I feel like it was about 2, maybe 3 weeks ago, it hit a phase where everyone was like, oh, it's like a beard now. It's not just like facial hair. So it was just interesting to see that evolution in the commentary. But I don't know. Last year, I decided just to go crazy for COVID, and I thought I'd shave it off this year in the hopes that maybe that would shake COVID away, but it seems like COVID's here to stay. So I don't know. Maybe we'll grow another crazy-ass beard. Let me know in the comments whether you guys think I should go that route. SSR had a question. Hey, Matt, most banks are able to do a refinance at 80% loan to value. For instance, with a property of $300K, I will get a second mortgage of $240 and equity of $60K in the house. That is untouchable. So the gist of what you said there is overall correct, but there's a little bit of details there that maybe do miss the mark. So one, when you have a property and you go to refinance it, yes, a lot of Canadian banks will refinance it at an 80% loan to value. And at that point in time, essentially the way that works is you'll get a new mortgage. So I just want to make sure, I think you knew what you meant, but sometimes when someone says get a second mortgage, right, that could mean a second mortgage on top of the first mortgage. But instead, what you're going to do is get a brand new mortgage. The proceeds from that brand new mortgage will go and pay off the original mortgage you had, and the surplus funds will be distributed to you if there is any surplus funds. At that point in time, you'll have a mortgage for $240,000. And you'll have $60,000 in equity. Now, in theory, you may be able to tap into that additional equity through additional lenders, right? So oftentimes people will go to a second or a private lender and be able to get a second mortgage. That second mortgage, in theory, could go up to 100% or, maybe in theory, even above 100% loan to value. But The only caveat there is going to be is if you're the first place mortgage, so the mortgage of $240,000 that you now have, the only caveat there is if that person has some sort of clause in their lending documents, or oftentimes what you'll see an A lender do, like when I say a clause, some sort of restriction or covenant that doesn't allow you to get a second place mortgage. But instead of necessarily having that covenant or restriction, what we'll see a lot of A lenders do is they'll offer it to you almost as like a value add, but it's really as much a value add for them as it is for you guys. So understand they're almost never doing you a favor, but the value add will be is like, hey, I know we're giving you a mortgage for $240,000 now, but what if in a year from now this house is worth, I don't know, $350,000? Well, if you let us go and tag this property up to the full purchase price of $300,000, we can then allow you to refinance or pull out some of the equity without having to go through legal fees. And so oftentimes people will be like, oh, that sounds cool. I'll say yes to that. And what they don't realize is by saying yes to that, it's now essentially as if you've got a $300,000 mortgage on the property, which means there's no free equity for a second place lender to come in place and tag behind the first place mortgage because they've gone to that $300,000 value. So just be aware of that. Any legal concerns giving your tenants keys early? Obviously, Brian, talk to a lawyer or paralegal if you want to make sure on this subject matter. On the surface, in general, there's probably not a lot of concerns other than like one, is the property properly insured? So again, like, are they moving in early? Do they have their tenant insurance early? Because if not, you could be exposed there. Second is sometimes I see landlords make these compromises with tenants, but actually this compromise is towards a red flag. So why do they need to move in early? Is it they just want to slowly move in? Is it, some sort of like situational context that makes a lot of sense? Or is it like they're maybe running from their past place, right? Then beyond that, when we're thinking about letting a tenant move in early, sometimes I see landlords do this where it's like, hey, if I don't have to clean it up and you just move in as is, you can move in early. I've been that landlord before. I get why we sometimes take those shortcuts. The vast majority of times, those shortcuts are going to bite you in the ass. So you probably will live to rue the day that you took that shortcut. So I wouldn't necessarily encourage you guys to do that. Oh, hey, what's up, Big Mike? Glad to hear that you found Peter's thumbnail inviting, so or welcoming. So that's great to hear. But yeah, speaking of getting started here, we are about 8 minutes in, and I haven't lit the joint yet. So let's do that now, and let us know how things are going in Florida. There, Big Mike. Are you Floridian? What's a Florida resident actually called? I don't know. But, or are you like a snowbird traveling from Canada? Are you one of those terrible snowbirds that left Canada while we were under lockdown? Oh, I think this joint's going to work. So we're all good. Potential crisis averted. Were you guys watching my earlier live stream today when I was playing around with the Bank of Canada assets? You guys weren't watching me play around with that graph. I really encourage you to take some time, play along at home, and just look at what's been going on. And so if we zoom out as far as they'll let us, which takes us back to about the end of the 80s, essentially, like, we can go through and look at all kinds of different things here. But the thing I really want to highlight, I know this is a little small probably on your screen, but I also want to be able to see most of the chart. Is if we go at total assets here. So we can see total assets, and this is in millions of dollars. We can see we never broke essentially $50,000 million, $50 billion in assets until kind of 2008, 2009, that debt crisis. Whereas we can see what's happened during COVID. Like, this is just, it doesn't even make sense. Like, it literally just is absurd when you look at, like, what was our jump? We didn't even jump $50,000 million during that craziness, right? Meanwhile, here we jump almost, like, at our peak, right? We're jumping almost $500,000 million, $500 billion. And again, like, let's look at securities purchased under resale agreements. Again, like, think about what this is technically telegraphing the economy, right? We're looking at this here, and we've got just under $40,000 million, $40 billion in securities purchased. And then since then, nothing. Then in 2015, 2016, we got into the game just because we could, essentially. And then at the start of 2020, that's when we saw our opening, and we just decided to blitzkrieg it. And, we acquired just a couple $100,000 million worth of securities under resale agreements. Nothing to see there. We're definitely not going to have any inflation. How would you pitch an investor or a JV about a property that I have no money for, but I know it's a crazy deal? Amar, one of the big things is, displaying competency, right? So if you don't have any capital, are you competent? Have you done this before? Do you have a history or a track record of success? If you don't, can we borrow that via credibility, right? Like, can we borrow that credibility from a mentor or a peer, someone that's currently implementing that investment strategy, someone that's currently succeeding at doing that? And then use them essentially as a case study, right? Or one of the deals they've done as a past as a case study. Use the credibility from that case, like, fully disclose this, but disclose that, like, hey, my mentor, my friend, my buddy, my sister, my mom, whoever it was, they did this deal. It worked out well for them. I'm trying to implement a similar business model. Oh, and by the way, if I find myself in a sticky situation, I've got this peer, this mentor, my mom, whoever, to show me the way, right? To break down for me exactly how I can course correct should I find myself adrift on this project. That may not sound like a lot, but that actually makes a big difference, right? If we think about it. I hope I don't set off my smoke alarm. That makes a big difference if we think about it versus the person's like, yeah, I've never done it before. Well, how much research have you done, right? How many deals have you analyzed before you decide this was the right deal? Is this the first deal you've ever looked at? Or have you analyzed 100 deals before coming and pitching me this deal? I used to talk about all the time that you should analyze 100 deals before you really find the deal. And so it was quite common for me to have to go analyze 100 properties before I'd find a good deal. Now, analyzing a property doesn't need to take a lot of time. In fact, it could be a minute or less, right? I could probably analyze 100 properties in an hour or two. This is really just looking high level. Does it have any potential? Is there a value add opportunity? Does it meet or exceed or have the potential to do so the 1% rule, right? Is there any severances? Is there any other value add plays here or ways to extract additional value from the property? If the answer is no, then okay. Is it being sold or priced, or is it distressed to the point where they're selling it with just built-in free equity? If the answer is no, again, what's my plan to make money? Is there any way to make money on this property? If the answer is still a no, it's like pass, move on to the next property, right? And once you get to know a market a little bit, it's not too hard. But again, if you spend a bit of time and you document this, if you were to come to me as a brand new investor who's at least analyzed 100 deals and you've got an Excel or a Google sheet that shows the address of all 100 properties and even just a 1 or 2 sentence about why you decided to buy it or why you didn't buy it, that's going to show me that at least you're willing to put in the work. Victoria's asking, can you get into real estate investing with $50K in the Durham region? You definitely can. But it really comes down to what's your goals as an investor, right? So are you going to be able to buy a property in the Durham region for $50,000 or less, even just with that being your down payment? No, it's probably going to be a real struggle, right? Because you're probably going to be limited to buying about a 250, maybe 300, maybe on the high end 400,000 if you're buying it as a principal residence sort of property. But at that point in time, we're going to start to get tapped out with that money. So the bigger thing is, are you going to be able to attract joint venture partners? Are you going to be able to attract other people's money, OPM? If the answer is yes to that, well, then again, you can probably easily succeed at that. Now, could you become a wholesaler and partner with another more experienced investor with deeper pockets? Yeah, and then you could go use that $50,000 on marketing, right, and try and build up all your leads in business. Have I looked at investing in the U.S.? No, I haven't, Chris. Never seriously. Don't have a competitive advantage. I don't love the idea of being heavily invested in any foreign country because when things go sideways, you just always go after foreign nationals first and their assets, right? So go after the foreigners. So for a variety of reasons, I'm just not interested. But the number one reason is I just don't have a perceived competitive advantage to going into the US market. So because I've got no perceived competitive advantage, I don't want to in business, you want to Peter Thiel talks about this, go after monopolies, right? You want it where the game's stacked in your favor. If I've got a competitive advantage, that's the game I want to play in the game of life or business. And it's just it's weird or naive to really speak in any other sort of language, right? And a lot of ways that you get that competitive advantage is by investing time and energy and becoming an expert. Big Mike is saying Floridian. I'm a Florida native, smoking right alongside you. We ain't full recreational yet, but at least it's medical. Nice. Have you tried CBD weed? Is that different than just weed? Is that weed that's had the THC taken out of it? Is it do you smoke it still, or is that just a pill? I've definitely tried CBD oils and different pills and stuff like that. But I haven't noticed significant benefits from it personally, anecdotally. But that's just me. Is it possible to pay interest lump sum for a full year in advance? Black and gold? Yeah. My biggest question would be why, though? It just really wouldn't make sense, right? Presumably, as an investor, we should be able to earn a greater return than whatever interest rate we're paying on that property. Because if you're not, why do we have the mortgage, right? If the mortgage is the best way for us to save money or to make money, essentially, again, it calls into question. That's why leverage is our friend while you're growing your portfolio, right? So the idea of paying down a mortgage fast when you're in the acquisition phase as an investor just doesn't make a lot of sense. Brian's asking, what are some of the bigger value add opportunities you look for? So I like easy value adds. So some of the bigger easy value adds are simply hey, is there some sort of information asymmetry here? So what that could look like is a property is being under rented. Sometimes what that could mean is, hey, there's a separate garage and you could rent out that separate garage for money. Hey, immediately by just knowing that, if I buy the property and currently none of the tenants are entitled to the garage, I can rent it out separately. I might make a couple $100 more a month. That could literally make this a great investment. That could be the thing that tips this over from an okay investment to a great investment. Outside of that, looking for opportunities to add living space. So sometimes the way we can add living space is, you've got a 3 seasons porch that can become 4 seasons, or an unfinished basement that can become finished, or taking a step further, taking less desirable living space and making it more desirable living space. So more desirable living space is living space people will pay more money for as a landlord. So that's often going to be bedrooms. People don't necessarily pay more money in rent if they get 2 living rooms or 2 kitchens, but they will pay more in rent if they get 2 bedrooms. So again, if I can take a dining room or a second living room or recreational room, and assuming this is all legal, and I can turn it into a bedroom, there's a good chance I could actually increase the rent I could command for that property, all while it's still the exact same property, essentially. Still takes up the same square footage, still essentially the same location, all those details. I don't necessarily even have to change anything. I might literally just go from like not having a door to putting a door on it, or literally just from calling it a dining room to calling it a bedroom. Maybe you buy a wardrobe, maybe you build a closet, maybe you have to do additional renovations or address it to make it a legal bedroom. But if we can take a less valuable piece of living space and turn it into more valuable, which again, the biggest bang for your buck is often bedroom. After that, it could be bathroom. So adding an additional bathroom, again, people will pay if they get an extra bathroom, right? Think about like, I don't know, I grew up on a farm, right? And like the house I lived in originally would have never had a bathroom built in it. But afterwards, they added a bathroom on, right? But that bathroom was like a tiny little room, and we had one bathroom in the house with 4 people, which again isn't crazy, but like it's enough where you're like, oh man, another half bath would noticeably change your quality of life, right? Like if you've ever gone from 1 bath to a bath and a half, you're like, oh my God, this is noticeably better, assuming you live with someone. If you live by yourself, probably not making a big difference in the day-to-day of your life. But again, that could make a big difference, and we may be able to command more rents, or we may be able to resell the property for more value because of it. Outside of that, other value-add opportunities could be things that will allow us to generate more rent. So it could be adding a dishwasher, it could be adding in-suite laundry, any other sort of amenity that tenants would be willing to pay a premium or more money for in order to get access to it. So again, sometimes this just takes creativity. Sometimes it just takes understanding your target demographic, right? Sometimes the way we can do that is with lightly furnished rentals. So we'll take a long-term rental and turn it into a long-term lightly furnished rental, which oftentimes means that we're going to attract a different clientele, one that's often less price sensitive. And because of that, we can usually generate a greater return on investment. And so again, that naturally adds value to the property. Do I think selling in Brampton area is good at this point? It's such an arbitrary question that I honestly wouldn't add value to even try and answer the question. Have you seen The Fruitful Investor, buying Kitchener-Waterloo homes, the negative cash flow, and relying on appreciation? Well, if you're asking if I've seen him, I've definitely seen Matt Pichet, although I haven't seen him since COVID started, so I can't guarantee he's not responsible for COVID, just like I can't guarantee he doesn't eat raw puppies, because he claims to be a mostly raw vegan. So I don't know what the other part is, Matt. But no, obviously I'm good friends with Matt Pichet. Known him now for like 4 years. It's actually been, that's pretty wild, but at least 3 or 4 years. And yeah, he's got a different business model than me. I'm not a huge fan. Like I was always good with his business model, but I imagine with the new hotter market, he's maybe had to compromise even further. So usually Matt was kind of break even-ish when all the dust settled on his rentals. And again, that may not be my favorite investment strategy, but I understand it. I think he does great renovations. I think that they create equity through those strategic renovations, and him having a great team of contractors. He's also able to like manage his projects at a average cost for contractors that I believe is below a lot of other people. So he does have competitive advantages there. But yeah, not a huge fan of it. Again, Kitchener-Waterloo, Cambridge is a hot market. It's been a hot market for a long time. He's doing very well. He's making really good money. This is not me throwing shade on him, but definitely not my strategy. And again, the key is you need to understand what's right for you. For Matt and his partners, a lot of them aren't necessarily concerned about cash flow. In fact, some of them, like as weird as this sounds, and it is weird to me, some of them don't even necessarily care about cash flow. And the reason they don't care is some have this perspective that they're doing very well for themselves. They're already in a high tax bracket and they don't want to pay any more taxes today. And so if they can have capital gains, if they can have appreciation, those are all taxes you pay tomorrow. And for them, there's an attraction towards that because, again, we used to talk about this in accounting, but there's a saying, don't let the tax tail wag the dog. And oftentimes we would find clients that would literally let the tax tail wag their decision-making process. So some of them would be like, if I cut off my arm, can I pay less taxes? Like, not literally to that extreme, but to that essence. And if there was any way, like they would rather hurt their business than pay more in taxes sometimes. So again, like I think that there's a certain aspect of the population out there that is actually attracted to the idea of break even or slightly negative cash flowing properties because they have this perception that they really don't want to pay an additional incremental dollar in taxes. I think it's kind of silly. I think one thing we just all need to understand as adults is the government is like your silent business partner, right? They're always going to take their cut. It was either them or the mafia, and at the time they seemed less violent. So I still think we made the right decision. It's just we've let them revert too much back to the mafia at this point in time. But yeah. Laura asked, if you're currently renting in an expensive city like Guelph, would it make more sense to house hack your first property locally or buy 20% down in a cheaper city? In a perfect world, if you can relocate to a cheaper city, and a lot of people will immediately just say that this isn't possible, but a lot of us learned how virtual our jobs could become or how unnecessary a office environment was towards us becoming productive members of society. So if you're not necessarily beholden to living in a high cost of living area like Guelph, then I would encourage you to look at house hacking in lower cost of areas. Again, obviously, Southwestern Ontario, there's a lot of opportunities. If you head north of Guelph, there's opportunities there as well. If there's a way to live for free, that's always the fastest track to success. There's just no other way that you're going to set yourself up for better personal financial success than living for free. And house hacking is almost always going to be the fastest way for individuals to be able to live for free. All right. What else we got here? How do you set up a personal real estate corporation when it is worth to do so versus investing as an individual? Brian, I'd really encourage you to seek accounting advice, because what you want to do is get accounting advice that's specific to your situation. And so obviously on a YouTube live stream, I can't give specific legal and accounting advice. So I would really take the time, reach out to a accountant that works with a lot of investors that are like you or a lot of investors that you aspire to become like, and really listen closely. Explain to them exactly what you're trying to accomplish. What are your big pain points? What are your big concerns? And also don't be afraid to tell them, hey, I don't necessarily know what I don't know. So like whenever I'm entering a new field, a new realm, a new aspect of business where maybe I'm less than competent, I usually just like to take ownership usually from the start. Hey, I don't know anything about this. Can you talk to me like I'm a 4-year-old, right? Can you talk to me like I'm in grade 4? Talk to me like I'm in high school. Whatever level of competency you've got in that field, that's where we should be setting expectations in that regards. Tony was asking, what are your thoughts on HELOCs? Looking to use equity, $50K in my home for down payment in a investment property. Have you used a HELOC before? Yeah, HELOCs are a very regular business tool for us to use as investors. So definitely nothing uncommon about using that. Again, you just need to really understand what's the exact situation and what exactly are you trying to accomplish. Make sure that that HELOC aligns with it. And ideally, we're going to look and make sure that this fits into our bigger, longer term picture. A strategy that myself and one of my business partners used for a while was he had a large HELOC on his principal residence, and we'd use that to be able to go buy properties in cash, quickly close, and then refinance. But also, a line of credit can just be great as a backstop or a buffer. It sometimes can allow us to go firm on a deal before we've got the mortgage, knowing that worst case, we can use the HELOC, or worst case, we can use the HELOC in cash or whatever our financial assets are. So Amar was asking, do I offer any sort of mentorship? He'd love to work with me personally. I appreciate that. So Cashflow Tribe is the best way if you guys are interested in getting to ask me questions one-on-one. If you're looking for more personal mentorship, we've got the counsel through Cashflow Tribe. So that's the best way to be able to kind of get me on a one-to-one or as close as a one-to-one basis as you can these days. And understand, Cashflow Tribe is very affordable. So like tonight, Cashflow Tribe, every Monday night, 7:30 to 8:30 Eastern Standard Time, I go live on a Zoom call. very similar to this. The only difference is I can see your face. You can share your screen. I can share my screen, and we can chat things through. And I literally spent half an hour on a call with a Cashflow Tribe member as we just analyzed his deal here in London, Ontario. He's paying $50 or $60 a month, right, to get access to that and a whole lot more. So I'd really encourage you guys, join Cashflow Tribe, try it out, come on to one or two of the live trainings if you've got questions. And I think you'll be surprised by how much we can cover in one of those calls. If you decide that you still want something a lot more, we've got weekend events. We've got one coming up this weekend or next weekend that you guys can jump on if you're interested. Or again, there's always the council. And I think if you go to join the council, just Google that. It'll probably work. What do you think? Oh, I lost my spot. What do I think about a possible real estate crash next year? Hey, man, I'd encourage you, if you really want to see my opinion, watch like every other one of my live streams where pretty much we talk about this on a almost semi-daily basis. So I'd really encourage you to jump over, check those out. In general, could it happen? Absolutely. Do I see immediate signs of it? Not at the data I'm looking at. So unless they're either fudging the data or there's more to the story than we realize, it seems like at least for the next few months, we should be good. Again, a year from now, man, if you can predict a year from now, you should be giving me advice and not the other way around, because I don't know anyone that can accurately predict a year from now. Because again, we're just coming up on the 1 year anniversary of COVID-19, right? It only feels like a lifetime, but you've actually only lived a year. Actually, like it just blows my mind. There's a disconnect in my brain where it's like, this does not compute. Hey, Matt, North York area, do you think sell or wait? At least 2 agents at my door daily. I think if you're willing to sell a property in this market, I think what you should do is find your pie in the sky price and list it. Put a price where you're like, I don't care. I don't care if tomorrow it doubles in value. If someone pays me this price today, I will never regret it. And the wonderful thing is in this market, odds are someone will pay you that I'll never regret it selling price. And yeah, I can see value in wanting to maybe take some chips or money off the table if that's your angle. Now, my biggest fear is that money or those chips are depreciating at a very freaking rapid rate unless you're going to redeploy it. So unless you've got something to redeploy it, I wouldn't immediately just sell just because. I'd want to have a purpose behind it. But I do think it could be a great time. Obviously, I've sold I sold a lot of my properties over the last year. We've been aggressively buying as well at the same time. But I definitely think it could make sense depending upon your personal circumstances and context. Nazar's there. So yeah, I see Nazar in the comment section. So he's the guy I spent half an hour with on the call. So he can confirm that. Do I have a metric you use to make sure you're not over leveraged in a market like this? Great question, Chris. I don't have a perfect formula. In a market like this, that is a great question. I would say for me, 25% average equity is the price where I'm going to starting to feel comfortable, especially if these assets cash flow, right? The key is, can you weather any short-term storms? And especially if those short-term storms end up being a couple of years, can you weather it? If the answer is yes, then I'm not too concerned about being over-leveraged, because if the property's debt service themselves, if they're cash flowing, unless I've got a lot of refinances coming up all at the same time, I can probably weather that storm. And again, especially if I've got 20% or more equity, it would mean I need more than a 20% pullback. So again, if we saw a return to just like year over year prices, we'd be looking at what, a 20, 30%, maybe 35% pullback in some markets. So it would be substantial. But once the dust settles, even if I had a 30% pullback and only had 20% equity, right? Let's say $1 million property, I only have 200,000 equity. That property now is worth 700,000. I'm $100,000 underwater. Not ideal, but if I'm cash flowing, being underwater is not the end of the world until it becomes refinance time. And now when it becomes renew mortgage time, if the bank will just let me renew without an appraisal, again, I can just keep skating by. If they won't, then I might end up with a cash call there, and that's definitely not going to be a fortunate situation. I may have to sell the property. I may have to pivot my business model. But as long as I don't have all my renewals coming up at the exact same time, I should be able to, average that out, right? Average out that sort of pain point. Am I preparing for an eventual economic downturn and drop in real estate values? I think it really depends upon what you defined as prepare. So the way I prepare is by staying extremely informed. So I'm definitely paying a shit ton of attention to everything going on, right? We're tracking the data more so now than ever before. I'm definitely I'm still always investing on fundamentals. So if anything, I think that, again, with hindsight, some of the properties we were chasing in the past, we were probably being too greedy with, and we should have just been locking up. Now, at this point in time, in the properties that we play in, the larger, like the smaller multifamilies, the 10 to 50 units, or larger multifamilies, depending on who I'm talking to. But in that world, we can still cash flow at the prices we're acquiring. At least the prices we're acquiring at, not necessarily the average price they're selling for, but we can cash flow at that price point. So we're comfortable that 5 years from now, we suspect the prices will be the same or higher than they are today. So again, if it fits all the other checks of our business model, we're comfortable moving forward. That's a very personal decision. Now, at the same time, I've made a good chunk of money and a lot of my net worth through real estate. So I think even if we weren't going through this crazy bull cycle, I would be at a rebalancing phase just because I've been doing this for 10 plus years now. So I think it's a natural time to look towards doing that. And so I definitely am looking towards doing that on the horizon. But nothing too drastic. Like, I'm not going to be moving into paper assets in a big way. There's one or two asset classes that I'll move into. And then for me, a lot of my diversification now, Jules, comes through actually through like creating and owning active businesses, right? And the income they generate. So again, that to me feels like it gives me a diversity of income sources, cash flow, and a little bit resiliency if we ever were to see a major market correction. Lewis is asking, what level of leverage do you begin to find is too much? Totally a personal decision. You talked about over 100% loan to equity. Sounds sketchy to me. Yeah, I'm not saying it's not sketchy. I'm just saying you can do it, right? So again, it's really important you pay attention to what I say you can do versus what you should do. Most of the time, if you actually listen to what I say you should do, it's very boring advice. I say things like you should live out your calendar, you should work hard, you need to do your due diligence, got to do your homework, have patience, all really boring shit. Should I open a corporation before I start real estate investing or before I start wholesaling? No. That's an easy one. You should talk to a lawyer before you even, an accountant and a lawyer before you even consider doing that. But I think a lot of individuals are well served to simply do their first deal or two outside of a corporation. Make sure you like real estate, right? If you've never done real estate before, how do you know you even like it? It just seems crazy. Yeah. I was going to say it'd be like marrying someone before you knew everything about them. But I realize some people do that. But to me, it just seems crazy, right? I want to have as much understanding as possible before making a decision. And so if I'm just going to set up a corporation just because, that's a very arbitrary decision. Now, if I've got a very clear business plan, I'm fully committed to it, and corporation is the best choice to make, well, that's a whole different ballgame, right? How's the Montreal market, in my opinion? I don't really know, Hudson, but if I had to guess, I'd predict it's hot because every market right now in Canada is hot. But outside of that, I can't be of a lot of value. Although there's some really nice mansions for sale in Quebec. And like literally, if it wasn't in Quebec, one, I'd probably buy it. And two, probably it wouldn't be for sale that cheap. So I think like Montreal specifically is this microcosm where you'll find a lot of non-Quebecers are willing to consider moving towards. So you do get a greater demand. Obviously going to be the closest thing to an international city in Quebec as well. Is it an international city? That's another person's debate that I won't be involved in. But I would really focus on what your underlying business model is there, Hudson. And does it make sense for you to invest with that business model today in Montreal? If the answer is no, then either you should look towards getting a new market or you should look towards using a different strategy in Montreal. If you have $1 million in cash right now, how would you use it? Ooh, that's a good question. Well, actually, straight up, if I had $1 million cash right now, I would have made a different offer on a property today, and I probably would have bought that property. So that's how legit Matt would have used it. But that's not the question you actually, or that's not the answer you were seeking. Honestly, I would probably use it in a way different way than what most of you guys are expecting. And I'm kind of debating with myself whether I should even say it out loud. But one of the things I'd like, obviously, I need to know, do I have my current skill set? Do I have my current relationships? Do I have all the other shit I own? Because again, if I actually own all the other shit I own, that $1 million, like, is less impactful. So I probably would go just use it on a principal residence or towards a principal residence. But if the goal was like, hey, no, you're starting over, you've got $1 million cash and that's it, Matt, other than maybe some of your basic personal financial knowledge, but you don't have your deep real estate connections or anything, I would take a beat. $1 million is a lot of money. You can make a lot of money off of that in a lot of different ways. Would you be happy making $100,000 for the rest of your life every year? Because if the answer is yes, you could probably just become a private lender, lend it out for more than 10%, bank a few percent to keep up with inflation, and spend the rest. And you'd be pretty good, especially if you're not scared to spend the principal. Now, for whatever reason, well, because of human nature, a lot of us are unwilling to accept that answer. So if I move past that answer, then the question becomes like, how much is enough and what are you trying to build here, right? Because again, if I just need a simple lifestyle, I can probably find an amazing house hack for 100, 200,000 down, go invest the rest of the money, hard money, and again, live a great lifestyle and be able to just do my thing. But if I was starting over, I'd be looking to start a business, right? If I wanted more than $1 million, I'd be looking to start a business. That business might be a real estate business. It might not be a real estate business. Again, really depend upon the context. What markets am I near? Do I have any competitive advantages? Am I willing to relocate to other markets or other areas with better or more profitable advantages, or that just better align with my initial skill set? But yeah, that's kind of what my thoughts are. But yeah, soon I might even change my answer to that. And if and when I'm willing to change my answer on live internet, I will let the Monday Night Crew know first. Hey, Matt, if a primary resident, the only home appreciated past 2 years, how do you take advantage to buy another property? Well, we could refinance or get a HELOC and pull that out, right? And we could use that as a down payment for our next property. We could cross-collateralize, right, to make our mortgage on the other property more secure and maybe get a more favorable interest rate. You could take out a second mortgage on it, right, and use those proceeds again. Lots of different ways that you could tap into it. Or, again, you could sell it, take all the money, and go invest that as well. How's my experience been with Airbnb lately? Yeah, overall decent. I don't run any of them day to day, right? So I actually have no idea what the details are. So we follow the rules. So I know at one point in time we could only rent it out to people that were social or were quarantining or whatever it is, the 14 quarantine. I think now we can just rent it out to anyone. Obviously, it hasn't been phenomenal, but it hasn't been terrible either. If I had a time machine and could just go back in time and tell Matt, a year ago today, should he keep up the Airbnbs or should he not? I wouldn't use the time machine for that. So like, it's not a big enough of a swing. Probably would have gone 10-15% more had we not done Airbnb over the last year versus having done it. Maybe even we would have got a little bit more because there was a couple periods where it was like complete lockdown. So maybe that's closer to 20%, 25%. But again, there is a risk that my long-term tenants could have not paid us as well. Again, we haven't had significant issues at any of our buildings, but that's never an impossibility, especially in this world. But yeah. Hey, what's up, Mike McCracken? Been a while. Good stream, Matt. Hitting on a lot of things I've been thinking about recently. Wash hands. This is really a tough time to decide where to invest. Yeah. Definitely. It's an interesting time. I think though, the one thing I will say for anyone that's maybe sitting on the sidelines, if you are sitting on the sidelines, please be just self-educating like crazy. Because one of my great fears is that we could be going through a huge inflationary cycle. And if we are, I would just hate to see someone have worked, whether it's, a year, a decade, or a lifetime, build up a big cash reserve and just see it be chewed through inflation. Like that would be, I know how heartbreaking that would be for individuals I know that have it'd be heartbreaking for me. But like, it'd be heartbreaking for my parents. It'd be heartbreaking for, I'm sure, everyone's parents that have probably saved up and they've just got like low interest rate GICs and stuff. So again, this is the time to be self-educating. If you're earning no return right now, I think that that's a dangerous return to be earning. And if you are earning a zero return, please be learning because you need to take action sooner than later. Again, that doesn't mean jump into real estate, stocks, crypto, or businesses blindly, but it means like you need to be making progress. Because I don't know, like despite all the crazy shit going on, you can still make money. A couple of years from now, I really hope that that's still the case. But there's going to be a lot of small businesses that are being beat down right now, right? There's a lot of businesses and industries that are about to be disrupted on a scale that's almost unfathomable a couple of years ago, at least on this short of a time horizon, right? When COVID first kind of started happening, one of the narratives I was talking a lot about was like, hey, I think COVID's a time machine. And it's actually speeding things up, right? It sped up certain innovation. Zoom, YouTube Lives. I guarantee YouTube Lives wouldn't be nearly as popular today had it not been for COVID, right? Who knows if all the YouTubers that are now doing daily or multiple daily videos, especially in the real estate and stock space and all that, if this would have evolved nearly as fast, right? Or if the stock market and like meme stocks and all that, who knows if that would have evolved as fast had it not been for COVID? I suspect probably not. And I'm sure there's all kinds of different things as well. Oh, speaking about, this has nothing to do with Mike McCracken, so I'll remove you from this so that you don't get associated with my next statement. But do you guys see, I'm pretty sure Stats Canada just released guidance that said that if the pandemic continues, that our current lockdowns may result in more deaths than COVID. So that's not the exact language, but essentially said that it was a possibility, which like, that's fascinating. And it's just going to be interesting. Like 3 or 4 years from now, when like all the scandals come out about all the crazy government stimulus spending and all the boondoggles and pork barrel spending, I just wonder if there's going to be any outrage, or will we have moved on to the next news cycle, right? Like, it's just fascinating. There's certain things that just seem to be like, doesn't really matter in this day and age, where we've all just decided like the We Charity thing or any of the other scandals involving the federal Liberal Party, you can pick one. The Governor General, right? Like all these things just kind of disappear. And we all just kind of shrug and we're like, well, that wasn't like, sure, there was a smoking gun, but there wasn't a body in the room. Or like, sure, there's a body, but there's no smoking gun. And we keep just tripping over these things. And like, I know a lot of people will interpret this as a me versus them thing, as in like, oh, you're going after the liberals or you're going after left-leaning parties. No, I literally believe all governments are going to naturally deteriorate towards corruption. It just is. And when your dad, when like honestly, probably the biggest thing on your bio is my dad had this job, that is concerning. Again, I understand the concept. Like you will be exposed to that ecosystem more. There will be just natural competitive advantages you'll develop, as well as like given competitive advantages that will occur in that ecosystem as well. So like I get why we have a natural tendency towards these political dynasties, but at the same time, we need to we as people need to take on more responsibility and not vote someone in because of a smile or a haircut, and not vote them in because of their pedigree either. Right? Like someone's parents shouldn't dictate. Like the fact that we're even having a discussion this day and age about the royal family and whether Canada should or shouldn't be involved in the royal family, like, of course we shouldn't, right? Like we can find a different arbitrary means of power to put in place instead of that, or we can essentially like liquidate that power and find different structures. Other governments have moved past it. It's absurd that it's even a conversation at this point in time. It's absurd that we spend any money towards it. But again, in the big scheme of things, that's probably not the hill to die on for me. But the hill to die on might be everything else that's going on right now, right? It might be, where do we end up 2 years from now? Because like, hey, what happened to flattening the curve, right? I thought it was supposed to be like 2 weeks and we flattened it. And it was like a month and you're supposed to flatten it. And it was like, just wait until summer and then it disappears. And it was like, oh no. And like, we can see the narrative. You can see the direction it's going, right? There's going to be different variants. I talked about this at the start of this year, that I suspect that we'll just have a lockdown season going forward, right? It's so difficult for me to imagine us giving the government a new shiny toy and then not wanting to play with it all the time. It's absurd. You wouldn't expect that of a toddler. You shouldn't expect it of a government. They're the same thing, essentially. Again, because like they can't really control themselves because there's not one person in charge, right? Like again, like any criticism we have towards Trudeau, it's not that I think he's some evil mastermind. I imagine there's a lot of incompetence and laziness that occurs there, where there's just like, you know, delegation of power and decisions into individuals. And again, to the point where like people essentially choose to pick lobbyists or not-for-profit employees to do their job for them because it's the path of least resistance. Again, let's be honest. If most of us just had someone show up at our day job and was like, hey, bro, I'll do your work for you. And you were like, what's the catch? He's like, I just want to talk to you. Just want to hang out. Just want you to like me more. And you're like, okay. Most of us would take that on. Most of us would be like, no, I can keep the separation of church and state here. Like, he's just going to do the work for me, but like, I'll totally proofread it until the time you don't, right? Until the time you don't. And that's what just happens. You have this deterioration, the corruption of the system. It's just a natural progression of any system, really, any human system that's built, at least, right? Again, I believe it was Jefferson said every generation needs a revolution, right? Like this, we should understand that history moves in cycles, that humans and nature moves with patterns, right? And all this stuff, like we should understand that not like ideally we catch this shit before it gets to a hard reset button, because those hard resets seem very expensive and time consuming where it takes generations. But like, this idea that we may occasionally have to at least tap that reset button. Maybe we don't want to completely do a clean swipe of the entire system. But like, yeah, we're going to have checks and balances. We're going to have to find ways to roll back power because they're never going to give it up. And we shouldn't expect it from them. Like, again, it would just be silly. Like, give someone anything. And like, there's scientific studies, right? This lighter means nothing to you right now. But like, I'm holding this lighter. It's a purple lighter. It's my lighter. If I need to light my joint right now, it's the lighter I'm going to use. And I've used it to light other joints. I probably have an unreasonable attachment to this lighter. Again, just because I'm a human. But because it's my lighter, I value it more. You might be like, hey, Matt, I'll give you, I don't know, a quarter for it. And it's a used lighter. I have no idea. I don't know what a Bic lighter goes for, but it's probably more than a quarter. I'd probably be like, no. Again, maybe that actually is the fair value. Maybe it's like one light away from being dead. But again, just because it's my lighter, I'm going to have a bias towards that. So like they've done studies with like literally coffee cups, and they're like, hey, as a participant in this study, you get this free coffee cup. And then after it's yours, they're like, hey, I'll give you $1 for the coffee cup. And the person's like, no, you know what? I'm going to keep the coffee cup. But if you were to actually like show them the coffee cup and be like, will you buy this for $1? They'd be like, no, man, fuck that shit. Like, I do not. No, I got plenty of coffee cups at home. And again, it's just, that's human nature, right? And so we're naturally going to see our politicians behave similarly. And then they just get all excited because we let them get away with this, and then they just start drooling, thinking about all the other things they can do to save us from ourselves. Checking in on the comments here. What areas to focus on in a given city to gain a competitive advantage? Eric, so really in that case, like it's really about becoming an expert. So whatever it takes to become an expert. So maybe that neighborhood lends itself well to garden suites because it's an older neighborhood on bigger lots. Okay, cool. Well, like then that's the direction I might want to go in order to become an expert in that market. Or maybe it's all 1960s bungalows and there's a great duplex conversion in that subdivision. Okay, well, then let's learn and specialize in that aspect of the business, right? Or maybe you're in Niagara Falls and there's a bunch of shady motels. Well, have you noticed there's a bunch of signs in Niagara Falls that say we buy motels? There's literally people that like are wholesaling, flipping, and buying motels. So again, you could specialize in that niche. Or maybe you live in Port Stanley or Port Franks and you're going to specialize in waterfront cottages. Really depends upon what you're trying to accomplish as an investor. Make sure that whatever strategy and market you choose is ideally influenced by your overall goals as an investor rather than doing it the opposite. And don't get me wrong, most of us actually started off with it ass backwards, but we eventually figure it out over time. Is weed legal in Canada? Yes, Ryan, it absolutely is. And I feel very bad for you because I imagine you're in a country where you have to ask that question. So yes, thankfully, that's one of the things that was done right. I believe that is a liberal thing. So thank you, liberals. But I think that's honestly just being on the right side of history. It's one of those things where like they take a privilege away from us and then give it back to us 50 years later and then want us to like thank them for being our liberators. Yo, sup, Matt? Hey, what's up, Bill? Hey, Matt, what's your opinion on companies like Opendoor, Redfin, and Zillow taking over real estate? Yeah, Mr. Codman, we've done 2 or 3 videos now on iBuyers and one on Zillow specifically. It's interesting. I definitely see them coming in and making real estate a more competitive game for investors like me. We're not scared of competition. There'll still be niches and opportunities in the market that they won't satisfy. In fact, probably 9 out of our 10 deals, I don't think they'll take away from us because our shit's weird and complicated. The shit they're doing is simple. Again, that's not like a knock on them. It's like that's what they're trying to do. And there's a higher volume of transactions in the market they're going to, where we're kind of off in the edge cases. But there's good money to be made in those edge cases. And so that's kind of our niche. That's our area of expertise. All right, we're coming up on an hour. Got about halfway through this joint. I'm going to light up one more time. You guys hit me up with 1 or 2 more questions in YouTube, and I will answer those. Otherwise, let me know. What's your over-under on... I don't even know how to frame questions anymore. Like when this lockdown is going to be done, when lockdowns are done, that just sounds like a stupid question where like, that the answer is never. Yeah, let me know. Do you think, will Americans be able to celebrate with whoever they want on July 4th, or will Joe Biden ensure that they can only get with small groups of family members? Meanwhile, in April, like 40,000 Texas Ranger fans are going to be at a baseball game, and Florida's just like been back to normal for months. Crazy time, but let me know. When do you think that we'll see the U.S. go through some sort of lockdown, or at least an attempt of lockdown by the federal government? Do you think that the Democrats or Joe Biden will try and really push for more social distancing. And have you guys seen that? I forget the medical agency, so I'm not going to miss associated here, but there was a medical agency or study came out that it appears that they're now indicating towards 3 feet for social distancing may end up being just as effective as 6 feet. So there's some interesting new studies coming out as well that it'll be interesting to see, like, whether do all data points matter or only the ones that fit a certain narrative. I forgot to light this joint. What's your favorite up-and-coming market you aren't invested in yet? Chris, on a big scale, Atlantic Canada, I could see it having some potential. I think it's a bigger gamble because the economics there, I don't think are as strong as Southwestern Ontario. But I think there's some potential there, especially if the market stays hot for the rest of the year. I think you could go into Atlantic Canada in a big way right now and do very well for yourself. Outside of that, cottages, vacation, rental properties, recreational properties, I see so much potential there. If you guys didn't see, we just dropped our first YouTube video on cottage properties. I released a 6,000 word free ebook on buying cottages, so really encourage you guys to go check that out as well. It's free, so it can't really get much better than that. But I really do think it's I think it's probably the most comprehensive guide in the world for buying a cottage, at least in Canada. It's kind of fun when we can now sometimes say things like that. But yeah, I think cottages. So again, what exact markets? I think if I had to, like, don't fuck this up for me, guys. So please don't just all flood into this market right away. But yeah, and there's the link to the cottage book. So really encourage you that. I think north of Huntsville, south of North Bay. If you guys were paying attention to what was going on during COVID, like during the initial wave of COVID, one of the most searched cities, the most searched city was North Bay. So that was the city that had the most increase in search traffic during peak lockdown in Canada. And I'm just assuming that wasn't a coincidence. I think a lot of people were like, fuck, I'm moving to the Muskokas. Fuck, I can't afford the Muskokas. What's above Muskoka? Is that North Bay? What the hell is the North Bay? Is that a city? Google it, man. I don't know. And then they went and Googled it, and they were like, oh, shit, yeah, it is a city. Oh, man, they got like a college, a university there. Oh, it's on Big Fresh Lake. Not as big of a fresh lake as like the Great Lakes, but it still seems like a pretty big lake. Yeah, we could maybe live there. And it's like a hell of a lot cheaper than south of Huntsville. So I could see that area again. If I could see a lot of money wanting to drift further north if this stays. Jeff's commenting, when you're so high, you forget to light the next joint. Absolutely. Hey, Matt, I'm in London, and I'm living in a bungalow that's a separate finished basement, yet it's zoned as R1. Have you had any experience applying to have the zoning changed to R2 to rent out? Yeah, like if you're living in it, you got no issues, right? I think though there was some recent stuff. I'm not super up to date on everything, so I'd encourage you to call the city or call a competent contractor and just have them walk you through the process. But it may not actually be as difficult as you're thinking. So I encourage you just get a little bit more perspective, but the exact context and how legal that unit's built, right? You got legal ceiling height. Does it cross all the T's and dot all the I's other than just the zoning? If so, I don't think it's going to be as big of a deal. And I don't even think you have to rezone it now. Again, depending upon the floor print, it might be off on a ratio side of things. What's my thoughts on the Saskatoon market? Actually, I was just talking to Jancy, who's our Saskatoon, Regina. Oh no, she's Regina. Regina sounds really hot. I imagine Saskatoon's also hot. It's been a while since I talked to the Epic Alliance ladies, so don't know for sure what's going on in their market, but certainly Jancy was saying she was working on a flip right now, and she's not even at the mudding stage yet, and someone essentially walked in off the street and bought her flip at full asking price. So, you know, when you can pre-sell your flips, that's a sign the market's pretty gosh darn hot there. All right. Oh, Chris said, bought a cottage 10 minutes from Gravenhurst this summer. It triples in value in 6 months after some rentals. Cottages are awesome, but there is a lot of work to do on some of those shacks. Yeah, absolutely. So again, it's all about figuring out what competitive advantage you want and carving it out for yourself. All right. Well, I appreciate you guys hanging out with me on another Monday Night Marijuana Matt McKeever Madness. And if you guys got value from this, smash that like button, hit subscribe if you're new to my channel. Make sure you hit the notification bell if you want to be given a heads up whenever we go live, because we're going live, you know, at least 6 times a week almost now. So if you haven't hit notification, you're probably missing out on getting to interact with me for free. And reminder, for those of you that generously DM me on Instagram offering to e-transfer me $30 for a 20-minute phone call, I don't do that anymore. But when I did, it used to be $1,000 an hour. So, I mean, just having to hit the notification bell seems pretty cheap, all things considered. So appreciate you guys. I'll see you on the next video, and I'll wrap up now.